Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. You have tuned in to the right program today. Let me tell you, I'm your host, Zach Drew. We've got a lot to cover and not enough time. So let's jump right into it. I want you to imagine what I'm about ready to tell you unfolding like a modern day spy thriller. A rogue 25-year-old DOGE operative, once a SpaceX insider, has turned the U.S. Treasury system on its head with extensive code changes. And what it's done is it's exposing a clandestine financial network that even funds terror groups. And now, as panicked Democrats scramble, filing articles of impeachment against President Trump in a desperate bid to stop DOGE from bringing them down, the stakes couldn't be higher. But there's more. This is all connected, and I'm going to break it down to you to show you how this is all one big picture. The very tariffs that Trump is imposing aren't random acts of economic warfare. They are strategic chess moves. This is not checkers, this is chess. And it's designed to reclaim control of a deep state that has been manipulating our financial system for decades, for over 100 years. And it all ties back to history. It's going to be very controversial. The centralization of power initiated in secret, on purpose, by President Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War, which paved the way for the 16th Amendment and the creation of the Federal Reserve later in 1913. This long game transformed America from a loose federation of sovereign states, little countries within the country, into a centralized powerhouse. A transformation that set the stage for today's epic struggle over our nation's future. This is 160 years in the making. You are going to want to stay tuned as I pull back the curtain on this high stakes drama. All of that and more right after this. Before I start today's content, I want to remind you that we are a nonprofit, all right? We are a 501c3 and we exist because of people partnering with us. Would you consider doing that today? If you would, go to zachdrewshow.com and click that bright orange donate button and become a monthly recurring partner. Or you can give the old-fashioned way to Zach Drew Show, P.O. Box 797, Decatur, Illinois, 62525. We did a big fundraiser around Christmas time, and we're hoping that people continue to give throughout the year. So get involved. Let's get into it. There's a lot to cover. Let's set the stage. Musk reveals Treasury has been auto-paying everyone, even known terrorist groups. The article says this: the DOGE team discovered, among other things, that payment approval officers at Treasury were instructed always to approve payments, even to known fraudulent or terrorist groups, said Musk in a Friday night tweet. They literally never denied a payment in their entire career. The Treasury Department's highest ranking career official quit after a clash with aides of Elon Musk over access to sensitive payment systems, according to the Washington Post, citing, of course, 3 anonymous sources. And now, a quick word from Alex Jones.
Several bureaucrats at the Treasury quit. Others refused to give over the codes to the federal Treasury database of payments going back, because they digitized them going back over 100 years. And the last 30, 40, they've got detailed down to the penny, and they know exactly who got what and where. And it is a free-for-all of crime. One of the biggest takeaways, we have all the documents right here, is that for decades, even when funding ended, they would never even end the funding and would just keep paying whatever forever. And you've got Democrat senators, Republican senators, House members, foreign, current, on these boards of NGO nonprofits getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year, in some cases, billions per organization.
So how they accessed this information is pretty wild, given that they had read-only access. And those with access resigned rather than turn it over. Once again, this story is playing out like a spy movie. So I'm not going to get into it, but there was an article that says it was actually on Drudge Report. Shock report, and it was shock report. 25-year-old DOGE operative, former SpaceX employee, had access to the Treasury system and made extensive code changes to the Treasury's system. Here's an article detailing that from someone on the opposing side of this situation. Day 5 of the Trump-Musk Treasury payments crisis of 2025, not read-only access anymore. Overnight, Wired reported that contrary to published reports that DOGE operatives at the Treasury Department are limited to read-only access to department payment systems, this is not true. A 25-year-old DOGE operative named Marco Elise, in fact, has admin privileges on these critical systems, which directly control and pay out roughly 95% of payments made by the U.S. government, including Social Security checks, tax refunds, and virtually all contract payments. I'm trying to talk fast, if you haven't noticed, because I really want to get to all of this, because it is unbelievable how this connects. Since I published my article at 6 a.m. yesterday morning, a number of current and former Bureau of the Fiscal Service officials have reached out and unfortunately confirmed the accuracy of my reporting, both in my understanding of the technical situation and the extreme dangers that the access, which had been reported up to that point, all thought read-only access was extraordinarily dangerous to this country. Now, two of those sources say that Elise's privileges include the ability not just to read, but to write code on two of the most sensitive systems in the U.S. government, the Payment Automation Manager, PAM, and Secure Payment System, SPS, and the Bureau of the Fiscal Service, BFS, housed on a top-secret mainframe. These systems control, on a granular level, government payments that, in their totality, amount to more than a fifth of the U.S. economy. Typically, those admin privileges could give someone the power. This is important. Typically, those admin privileges could give someone the power to log into servers through secure shell access, navigate the entire file system, change user permissions, and delete or modify critical files that could allow someone to bypass the security measures of and potentially cause irreversible damage to the very systems they have access to. This is what he is saying Elise can do, and acting like this is a horrible situation, when in reality, what this operative is doing is preventing the real enemies from doing those very things, from going in and navigating the entire file system, from changing user permissions, from deleting or modifying critical files that provide a trail. But left-wing nutjobs predictably spinning the story, they're calling evil things good and good things evil. Let's go back to the article and I'm going to continue. Technically, I don't see why this could happen, a federal IT worker tells Wired in a phone call late on Monday night, referring to the possibility of a DOGE employee being granted elevated access to a government server. If you would have asked me a week ago, I'd have told you this kind of thing would never in a million years happen. But now, who the expletive knows? All of this is absolutely true according to my sources. I'm going to read this one more paragraph and I'm going to nix the rest of the paragraphs because I want to get to more stuff. Additionally, I can exclusively report that while there was initial hesitation from IT leadership to give them access, they relented. However, they still believe this was extremely risky, with one member of leadership saying, "I've never done anything like this before." According to a source familiar with the situation, a current IT employee of the Bureau of the Fiscal Service told me, quote, "This level of unchecked access is critically dangerous to the economy and the government." When I replied, "This is terrifying," to be informed that they have write access, this source replied, "Yeah, it's not good. Read privileges on its own would have left room for catastrophe. But read and write is apocalyptic." Apocalyptic for who? Elizabeth Warren. Here is Elizabeth Warren doing her best as one of the many pawns of the deep state to fearmonger the public into thinking this was a horrible thing. Take a listen.
And the system that makes sure that you get the tax refund that you're owed has been taken over by Elon Musk. And every organization from your state government that uses federal money on that bridge project to the local Head Start that takes care of little kids while their mommies and daddies go to work is now at the mercy of Elon Musk. Elon just grabbed the controls of our whole payment system, demanding the power to turn it on for his friends or turn it off for anyone he doesn't like. Now, there's a second problem here. It's not just payments from the federal government that are now in Elon's control. Elon and his handful of friends now have full access to your personal and financial information that's in the system. Your payment history, your social security number, your bank account numbers. Elon now has the power to suck out all of that information for his own use. And there is a third problem. In order for this handful of programmers to gain access to our $6 trillion payment system, we don't know what safeguards were pulled down. Are the gates wide open now for hackers from China, from North Korea, from Iran, from Russia? Heck, who knows what black hat hackers all around the world are finding out about each one of us and copying that information for their own criminal uses. Donald Trump and his billionaire buddies are determined to take over this government.
She says, think about the babies. Think about the grandmas and the grandpas not getting, financial help. Think about your tax returns now at risk. All false. It's scary they now have control. This was she's saying over $6 trillion through the Treasury Department. Somehow she missed how trillions of dollars with records going back over 100 years could be exposed. She missed that part. We're talking about how terrorists and terrorist organizations have received billions of dollars in payments. And like we stated before, when the orders came to stop the payments, not one future payment was frozen. And the deep state, their antichrist ledgers are being exposed right now. Why? Because every hidden thing done in secret will be exposed. That's why we're seeing panicked Democrats already filing articles of impeachment against President Trump. It's a desperate attempt to stop DOGE from bringing down these blood-sucking demons that pull the strings in Satan's kingdom. And I'm trying to tie this together for you. Because a lot of times whenever these big news stories happen, we look at just the story and not these other things taking place to see how it all comes together as one big picture. Trust me, Donald Trump is not an idol of mine. But I do understand that God has given him a very strategic mind. When most of the population with our IQ, we do just play checkers. Chess is a whole different, and he's playing chess with all the moving pieces of how to bring this nation back. My bridge between the subjects, tariffs. This brings me to my next subject. Trump's so-called controversial tariffs, and it's controversial actually on both sides of the aisle for people that don't understand what's actually taking place. So these tariffs and the larger goal behind them. This is not checkers, it's chess. Every move is strategic, and all of these things are connected. And I'm going to break it down. This is multifaceted. First, it exposes how the deep state has been leveraging the Treasury Department to finance its agenda for a new world order. And we have the ledgers. That's the first part, all right? Exposing them, taking them down. Second, it's about stopping the financial hemorrhaging caused by reckless government spending that's driving us deeper into unimaginable, unsustainable debt. At its core, it's about pulling back the curtain of the deep state's operations while cutting unnecessary government waste. But here's the key. Through strategic tariffs on foreign nations, many of which rely on and exploit the American people, we're shifting the financial burden off the backs of U.S. taxpayers. Instead of draining American families through extreme taxation, these countries now have to pay to play in our markets. And that revenue funds our federal government, just like it did before the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, creating a whole new America that year, an America dependent upon the centralized banking system funded through our tax dollars, shifting the focus from tariffs as the primary means of government revenue This is so much more than our modern thoughts on tariffs. It's about dismantling a system designed to keep America in debt and under control. Let me lay another piece of foundation from something that took place about 10 days ago, and we're going to come back.
These tariffs will go into effect tomorrow.
Yep.
25% on Canada and Mexico, 10% on China. Are you expecting retaliation?
We'll see what happens, but I think, unfortunately, the retaliation has already happened. The problem with this whole idea that they're going to retaliate is they have already been taking advantage of America for decades. The retaliation is Donald Trump saying no more. We're not going to be taken advantage of anymore, and I think it's important the president is doing what he's doing.
Give me about 4 minutes to set this up for where we're going. Some quick bullet points. So on February 1st, the Trump administration slapped 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico and 10% tariff on China. Another bullet point, there could be certain exemptions, such as for oil and gas. Next, last Friday, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that any tariffs would stoke an immediate and forceful response. And he says, quote, we are ready with a response, a purposeful, forceful, but reasonable, immediate response. It's not what we want, but if he moves forward, we will also act, said Trudeau, adding that all options were on the table. Then Canada sends 75% of its goods and service exports to the U.S., meaning that the tariffs will sting. Last bullet point, Trump then paused tariffs as Mexican president agrees to send 10,000 troops to the U.S. border. A couple more minutes. Foundation, then we're going to keep going. Some noteworthy posts from President Trump on Truth Social. Here they are on the screen. I just spoke with the president of Mexico, and it was a very friendly conversation wherein she agreed to immediately supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers on the border separating Mexico and the United States. These soldiers will be specifically designed to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrants into our country. We further agreed to immediately pause the anticipated tariffs for a 1-month period during which we will have negotiations headed by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent, and Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, and high-level representatives of Mexico. I look forward to participating in those negotiations with the president as we attempt to achieve a deal between our two countries. So ahead of the negotiation, Trump admitted there could be pain amid the ongoing trade wars, but warned America would no longer be the stupid country taken advantage of economically any longer. Here's the post on Truth Social. The tariff lobby headed by the globalists, and that's important to understand. The tariff lobby, headed by the globalist and always wrong Wall Street Journal, is working hard to justify countries like Canada, Mexico, China, and too many others to name. Continue the decades-long rip-off of America, both with regard to trade, crime, and poisonous drugs that are allowed to so freely flow into America. Those days are over. The USA has major deficits with Canada, Mexico, and China, and almost all countries owes $36 trillion, and we're not going to be the stupid country any longer. Make your product in the USA and there are no tariffs. Why should the United States lose trillions of dollars in subsidizing other countries? And why should these other countries pay a small fraction of the cost of what USA citizens pay for drugs and pharmaceuticals? As an example, this will be the golden age of America. Will there be some pain? Yes. Maybe and maybe not, but we will make America great again, and it will all be worth the price that must be paid. We are a country that is now being run with common sense, and the results will be spectacular. One more video, and then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty.
I mean, here's the angle, and it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It's like, all right, China and other countries and other companies from other countries, if you want to access wealthy America and our huge buying base, you're going to have to pay to come here, right? And that's what the tariff is all about. That's all it is. It's like a pay to play. You're going to fund our expenditures, everything that we have as a country. And if you don't want to, if you're not going to, well, then you don't get access to the American consumer.
And
right?
the globalists set up deindustrialization here to control us in their own admissions. Now he's using their setup against us, that now all these other countries are totally dependent on the manufacturing, that they'll basically have to capitulate. And then in the medium term, it will then bring back the industrial strategic base.
All right, here we go. So I have here in my notes sections. The first one is called The Founding Vision, a union of sovereign states. Before the Civil War, America was truly a federation of sovereign states, almost like independent nations loosely tied together under the Constitution. The federal government had limited, clearly defined powers. The real authority rested within the states, which governed themselves in most matters. This wasn't just a technical arrangement, it was a safeguard against tyranny, ensuring that no centralized power could dominate the people. Then Lincoln's presidency, a turning point. President Abraham Lincoln's actions during the Civil War radically redefined the nature of the Union. And I want to preface it with this. Yes, the war was fought over slavery, but it was also about the deeper issue of state sovereignty versus federal authority. The Southern states didn't just secede over slavery. They seceded because they believed in their constitutional right to govern themselves without federal interference. So when Lincoln refused to recognize secession and waged war to preserve the Union, he essentially declared that the federal government was supreme, that states could no longer leave the Union. Yes, but he was justified over slavery. Was that his thoughts? Was that Lincoln's thoughts according to his own statements and diaries? No matter how oppressive they felt Washington had become, this was a fundamental break from the original constitutional framework. I'm posing a question. Did Lincoln use slavery as a tool for centralization? This is the controversial part. Many people do not know this. The Emancipation Proclamation wasn't issued until 1863. I'm going to say that again. The Emancipation Proclamation wasn't even issued until 1863, 2 years into the war. Before that, Lincoln repeatedly stated his primary goal, very clear, was to preserve the Union, not to abolish slavery. In fact, he said, quote, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it." That is a direct quote. That begs the question, was the abolition of slavery a moral crusade, or was it also a strategic move to strengthen federal power? The Federalist Party was already gone, but if you look at all of Lincoln's thought processes and his strategic moves, he absolutely was a Federalist. And by framing the war as a battle against slavery, Lincoln galvanized moral support, both domestically and internationally. Then, and therefore undermining the South's ability to gain foreign allies. And at the same time, this moral high ground justified an unprecedented expansion of what? Federal authority. If this same battle was happening today, and slavery was not a part of the issue, do you understand, as conservatives, MAGAs, that you would all be considered Confederates? Oh, that's like calling us Nazis. It's interesting how the winners of history write history. Slavery is a wicked, evil thing. But the quote's from Lincoln himself. I wouldn't free a single slave if I could preserve the Union, if I could preserve the power of the federal government. Do you get that? The legacy now, from republic to federal monarchy. After the Civil War, America emerged as a nation where federal power reigned supreme. It was the turning point. The 14th Amendment further cemented federal authority over the states. Today, Washington dictates everything from education to healthcare, far beyond what the founders envisioned. In essence, while Lincoln's leadership ended the evil of slavery, a moral victory that cannot be overstated, well, it also paved the way for the bloated, overreaching federal government we have today. The United States shifted from a constitutional republic of sovereign states back to a monarchy. with Washington, D.C. as the throne, D.C. wearing that crown. And the bigger picture, history isn't black and white. Lincoln was both a liberator and arguably an architect, an intentional architect of federal overreach. The question we face today is, how do we honor the moral victories of the past while reclaiming the constitutional principles that made America truly free? That's the fight of our generation. Now, how does all of this tie into tariffs and Trump's chess game? You see how I take many topics and I'm showing you how it all connects. Well, it ties in perfectly. Because what started with Lincoln's centralization of federal power during the Civil War, it set the stage for the next major transformation in 1913, the 16th Amendment, federal income tax, and the creation of the Federal Reserve. These weren't isolated events. These were a part of a long game to shift America from a nation of sovereign states and a free nation to one controlled by a centralized federal authority. I created this. I asked Andrew to create graphics and put them on the screen. So let's go on here just to kind of hammer this final nail into the coffin. Lincoln's legacy, the rise of federal supremacy. After the Civil War, the federal government no longer saw itself as a servant to the states. It saw itself as the master. The war established that federal government could override state sovereignty whenever it deemed necessary. That shift in mindset created fertile ground for even more federal control. You understand that every problem that we are having in America today, at least the vast majority of them, are a result of this. This is the fight that we are currently in, a 160-year fight. Pre-Civil War, the federal government had to rely on tariffs, import taxes, to fund itself because it couldn't legally tax individuals directly. Post-Civil War, the government had tasted centralized power. Now they wanted control over not just the state laws, but your income. The final blow in 1913, income tax in the Federal Reserve. Fast forward to 1913, the 16th Amendment was ratified, allowing the federal government to tax individual income directly. The Federal Reserve Act was passed, handing control of America's money supply to a private banking cartel disguised as a federal institution. Why 1913? Because by then the constitutional barriers that once protected individual and state sovereignty had been eroded. The people had been conditioned to accept federal dominance, thanks in part to the precedents set during Lincoln's presidency. Before this, America was funded primarily through tariffs, which protected American industries from foreign competition, encouraged domestic production, and it didn't punish citizens for their productivity. But tariffs had a major flaw. From the government's perspective, they limited federal power. Now do you see why people are so angry over the tariffs? And it's gonna be sore for a couple of years getting back on track, if we can do it. But tariffs depended on international trade, meaning the government couldn't just print money or confiscate wealth whenever it wanted. Income tax solved that problem for them. It created a direct pipeline from your paycheck to Washington, D.C. with no middleman. The big picture, a long march toward control. Lincoln centralized political power under the guise of preserving the Union. The progressives in 1913 centralized economic power under the guise of fairness and financial stability. Today, we live under both systems, a powerful federal government that controls both your freedoms and your finances. This wasn't an accident. It was a step-by-step dismantling of the constitutional republic the founders created. They replaced it with a system where the federal government is king and we, the people, are subjects, taxed, regulated, and controlled at every turn. Do you see how all of this is one huge story? It's not like, oh, Trump's doing this. Oh, this administration's doing that. Oh, we're over here doing this. It's all one story. Listen to me. America was never meant to be this way. We were never designed to be shackled by the crushing weight of income taxes, government overreach, and bureaucratic tyranny. That isn't America. Do you know how our nation has been on borrowed time since 1913? Think about the time period known in history, right? When the greats talk about the great American experiment, where the world watched in awe. I'm talking about a time in America's past where the Alexis de Tocquevilles of the world, who wrote volumes on America's success, stated nothing like this had never happened in man's history, saying things like America is great because she is good. If America ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. Tocqueville marveled at America's moral compass, which was rooted in faith and in community, not government mandates. This greatness came from individual virtue, not centralized power. You see, whenever these greats talked about America, and we like to quote them, they could not say these things after 1913. Whenever we think of America, America the great, the good, the right, the virtuous, that's pre-1913. We've been on borrowed time since then. Alexis de Tocqueville, he couldn't say things like that today. He couldn't say things like the health of a democratic society may be measured by the quality of functions performed by its private citizens, nodding to America. He saw that America thrived because citizens, not bureaucrats, carried the responsibility of shaping society. Or how about Thomas Jefferson? He said, the government that governs least governs best. Jefferson's vision, it was clear. Freedom flourishes when government steps back. Can you imagine him seeing today's sprawling federal bureaucracy? Another quote from him, when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. This was the heartbeat of the American Revolution. Compare that today where the government uses surveillance, regulations, and taxation to keep us in check. How about James Madison, the father of the Constitution? He said this, the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. Madison would be horrified to see how this balance has been obliterated. The federal government now dictates everything from healthcare to education. And then we have Frederick Douglass. I don't have time to mention it. Daniel Webster. Why these quotes matter today? These statements couldn't be made today without sounding like radical rebellion, because we no longer live under the system they praised. America was unique because of its limited government, individual sovereignty, moral foundation rooted in faith, economic freedom without oppressive taxation. The tragedy, this very success on the American experiment was hijacked by those who used that prosperity to justify more control. We traded liberty for security, and now we have neither. And tariffs. That was one of America's secret weapons. So to wrap this show up, before 1913, we didn't have the IRS breathing down our necks. We didn't have them auditing hard-working Americans or punishing success. The government was funded through tariffs on foreign goods, not your income, not on your labor. The wealth you earned stayed in your pocket, where it belongs. We weren't just a country, we were an economic fortress. And tariffs protected our industries. They created jobs. They ensured foreign nations paid for the privilege of accessing American markets. And that system worked because it put America first. Sound familiar? That's not a new idea, it's how this nation was built. But everything changed in 1913 in the 16th Amendment and the creation of the Federal Reserve. That's when the federal government got its hands deep into your pockets. Income taxes became the norm. And with them came the IRS, a weapon of control disguised as an agency. Now the average American hands over like 30-40% of their income to federal, and state and local taxes. That's servitude. Think about it. Our founding fathers fought the Revolutionary War over taxes whenever they were around 1% to 2%. The Boston Tea Party wasn't about a tax hike on lattes. It was about principle. They knew that taxation without representation, it was just the beginning of tyranny. And today, we're taxing our income, our property, our purchases, our savings, and even our death. We're living under the very system our ancestors rebelled against. So now how do we fix this? We go back to what worked. That's why this whole thing is twofold. We are exposing the money trail. We are exposing this system that was essentially established in 1913 of this globalist deep state operation. We're going to fix the hemorrhaging. And while we try to build product again in America, we can survive off of tariffs placed on other countries to get us back on track. And it is going to be hard for a couple of years. And most of the nation is not going to do it because we live in a first world developed country and we like convenience and ease. We don't want things to be difficult. We'd rather have another, 10 good years and our entire country collapse forever than 1 to 2 fairly difficult years. And if the Lord would tarry, our country could last another couple hundred years. We need to reinstate protective tariffs, eliminate the federal income tax, abolish our radically evil IRS system, or reform it. We need to shrink the federal government until it's no bigger than what the Constitution intended. And this isn't just about money, it's about freedom. It's about reclaiming the spirit of 1776. It's about standing up and saying enough is enough. We don't need more government programs. We need less government, more liberty, and an economy that serves the people, not the other way around. Patriots, the time is now. It's time to fight, not with muskets anymore, but with our voices, our votes, our vision. Let's bring back the America that was great. Great not because of government policies, but because of freedom, because of our faith, and because of fearless patriots like you. I'll see you next week.